But let's get started. So I'm Chris Castle. You can use the hashtag if you want to ask questions or maybe even engage after this if you have questions. And I'm a developer advocate at Heroku. So what does that mean? I used to be a developer. I guess I still am a developer, but the code that I write is demos and never goes into production. I don't have to worry as much about creating bugs. I also like skiing and motorcycles. Is anyone else a skier or into motorcycles here? Yeah? All right. Nice. And I live in Seattle. Came down just for this to chat with you guys and to hang out with some of my Heroku friends. But I also really like Heroku. So this is the command line interface. I was just looking at my Heroku account, and you can see that it was created in 2010. So I've been working for Salesforce and Heroku for 2 years now, but I've been a user and fan of Heroku for, over 7 years now. And kind of fell into what in many ways is my dream job, getting to talk about something I really enjoy and getting to work with developers, which is a community I enjoy. And the reason I liked Heroku so much is because it kind of just gave me the simplicity to create something and immediately get it live, right? Create a web application and get it live, and not worry about lots of other things kind of underneath that. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get going. So what are we going to talk about in general? What sorts of things you can build with Heroku? Why build on Heroku versus other platforms? And then, fingers crossed, I'm going to do some demos. I'll try to get through the slides quickly so I can move to the demos. But first, I have some questions for you folks. So how many of you would classify or call yourself a software developer? Raise your hand, I'm curious. All right. And now I actually have a question. I was just talking to Pat here a minute ago. How many of you were a Salesforce developer and you've kind of expanded into developing on other platforms, maybe other languages, versus starting as a Java or PHP or some other type of developer and getting into Salesforce development? So for the first one, how many of you started with Salesforce and maybe you still just do Salesforce and are curious, what is this Heroku thing, and that's why you're here, but haven't had experience, with .NET and PHP and Ruby and these other languages? Okay, cool. Yeah, it's cool. I've seen people go in both directions, and I was just curious kind of how many have come from Salesforce development and gone to other development, or come from other development communities and gone into Salesforce. So how many of you would call yourself Salesforce developers right now? So most people, right? This is the Salesforce developer meetup. Nice. Okay. And now some more. Hopefully, I can prompt some people to call some answers out. So, what sort of things do you build or have you built on Salesforce? What types of problems do you solve or solutions do you build on Salesforce?
Customer satisfaction tracking.
Okay, customer satisfaction tracking. All right, with surveys or yeah, okay.
Surveys, reports.
Surveys, reporting. Okay. What else?
ERP.
BRP?
ERP.
ERP, right. Okay. Which is Enterprise Resource Planning. Yeah. Okay. What is ERP actually? What is it? It sounds like a big, hairy, crazy thing. What do you, when you build ERP, what does that mean?
And we use Heroku because some stuff doesn't run so well for that model.
Okay. Okay. You use Heroku and maybe the tools that Force.com provides doesn't really fit. So that was going to be my next question. What sorts of things can't you build on Salesforce, or maybe are a little bit clunky to build kind of in the Salesforce environment? Or what things have you wanted to build, or what has your boss or your clients asked you to build that you were like, yeah, we could hack that onto Salesforce, but it might not be the best use of it, and it might not be stable or be able to scale. Any examples there? Yeah?
Consumer-facing websites.
Consumer-facing websites, okay, yeah.
PDF generator.
PDF generator, okay, cool. This is good. As some background, I've never done any other than in this role, Salesforce development. So I came from Ruby and Node and Java as programming languages, and I'm learning about this now. So it's interesting to hear stuff you guys have built. So let's move on. So that last question was kind of motivating this, right? This is Heroku is here for all these things that might not fit really, really well on Salesforce. You can do a lot of stuff with Salesforce, right? But if you want to make a custom PDF generator. Actually, Heroku has a newsletter that comes out every month, and we have this thing called the Heroku button. And I think a month or two ago, the button of the month was a PDF generator that someone in the community created, and we just kind of highlighted it in the newsletter. Created a PDF from a web page, right? So if you have a web page that's a receipt or an invoice, you click a button and it generates a PDF. Or don't even click a button, it's written in code, kind of automated. So Heroku's here to help you kind of build these more creative, flexible, kind of out-of-the-box experiences. So that's good, but like, what is Heroku? How many of you have heard the name Heroku? Most people, good. How many of you have used Heroku? Oh, okay, good amount. That's good to see. So Heroku kind of in general is this cloud platform. It's a platform as a service, and it's for building, delivering, managing, and scaling apps. But then, when you read that, you're like, well, what does apps mean? That's kind of one of those like generic kind of fuzzy words. Does that mean a Force.com app? Or maybe that's not the right name for it now. Or is that like a mobile app? Or is that like a website? So let me give you some examples of what that might be. Here's one. This one's kind of interesting because it's internal. So this is called Concierge. It's Salesforce's internal help desk tool. It was built and runs on Heroku. And when any one of our like 25,000 employees have a question about IT or expenses or traveling internationally or whatever, you just go here and you start typing something, and it starts giving you articles to answer your question. And if it doesn't have an answer, it ultimately has a link for like live chat or call someone or email to open a ticket. But super simple, kind of pleasing, like pictures and user experience. Because generally when you go here, you're frustrated and you have questions and you're confused. So Heroku gives you the kind of this ability to like have full control over the design and the user experience. Here's another one. Some of you might have heard of Trailhead. Yes? So Trailhead is built by the internal team here that built Trailhead, built it on Heroku. But just another example of maybe your company needs to build a learning platform or needs to build wants to like add gamification to something that's customer facing. Here's another example. This is from Red Robin, Tasty Burgers. They created a mobile app, and the API that supports it behind the scenes is running on Heroku. They're also a Salesforce customer, so things are integrated with Salesforce too. And here's a kind of a more unique one. Clear Channel is a Salesforce customer, and they built this outdoor advertising inventory management system as an app on Heroku because they needed this kind of customized application to manage all the different billboards and what was running on what at what time and what was scheduled for what, to make sure that was all organized and transparent and clear. And they've integrated this map in there so you can see things kind of from a geographic perspective and then get more details and pictures of them. And then again, this is like the data is all connected to their Salesforce data. Right, and then tons of other examples, right? So there's small companies like Dubsmash, Product Hunt, bigger companies like Citrix, or even like multinationals like Toyota that are using Heroku. I just heard of a new one called Coin, spelled Quione. Quioine. That sounds right. So it's like a cryptocurrency platform. I think in Australia or Asia or something like that. Singapore? Someone knows it? that's running on Heroku now. So all sorts of different kind of, the sky is your limit for what you can build and deploy onto Heroku. And so like common theme there, right, is that flexibility. You can write in any programming language you want. These are our officially supported programming languages. This means that we have a engineer that's kind of curating the process, the deploy and the runtime process for you for these languages. But for instance, many iOS developers use Swift. Swift can now run on a server. Someone in the community created a Swift build pack, which is kind of how you get a language running on Heroku. Someone in the community created a Swift build pack so you can run a Swift server on Heroku. And because they knew that language, it was easier for them to get started than using PHP or Python or Ruby or something like that. And then kind of on top of that, right, there's no restriction in language. There's no restriction in like frameworks or kind of libraries that you use in your application. So you can use Ruby on Rails or Django or Laravel with PHP or Spring in the Java world. And there's tons of others. And new ones that come up will work on Heroku too. But what's another common theme with all that stuff? Oh, I'm going to turn the lights down so you can see this stuff better. So the other common theme with that is if you want to run these applications and have this flexibility, you need servers, right? You need somewhere to deploy this thing and run it. It's not just going to be running on your the hardware that's kind of supporting your Salesforce org or your Salesforce instance. So, now I have to think about that. I need servers. So that's where Heroku comes in, and we're really focused on just making it easy to go from this idea for an application, a website, a mobile app, whatever it is, to a live URL without kind of infrastructure, i.e. server headache. And so it starts here. When you say servers, that's really not the end of it. There's a lot more that comes up when you start talking about servers. There's, now I need storage, and now I need networking, and then I have to think about virtualization and containers and what operating system I'm going to put on there, and then I can deploy my code and run my application. And not only do I need to do that once, but I need to manage all that stuff, or hire people to manage it. So then there's this concept of Amazon Web Services. I think everybody's heard of Amazon Web Services or knows that. So they came along and they're like, we're going to do infrastructure as a service. So they handle all these four bottom blocks here, right? They handle virtualization, networking, storage, servers, and then you can just put your OS on there and your app, and you can go. You're good to go, right? But there's actually a lot more there than just the operating system and your app. There's a lot more to manage and worry about there. So let's talk about some of that, right? Who wakes up at night to fix a server when it crashes? Or your application crashes, or when there's a security vulnerability like Meltdown or Spectre, who's going to be just working on that all day for 6 weeks? Heroku operations engineers have been doing that instead of your team. What about like scalability? When you start to get popular, you get mentioned in the New York Times or the Financial Times or something, and you need to scale up. And you didn't know that was going to happen, or maybe you had a week's notice or something like that. Now you gotta scale up your application. Many companies have compliance issues. Health or financial companies have compliance issues or compliance requirements. So you have to think about those things. I kind of mentioned monitoring. There's orchestration of all those containers or virtual machines, and general security of the platform. So you have to manage all that stuff on top of Amazon Web Services. And AWS provides a lot of things to help you with all of these, but ultimately you still need to manage all of these things. And again, you don't only have to build these things once, but you have to manage them on an ongoing basis. And I mentioned scalability earlier. So when your app gets mentioned or your company blows up in a good way, how do you scale? And then there's failures, right? So when you're a small company or you're just starting out, maybe having some downtime is okay on your website. It's not going to be a huge cost to your company or hit your revenue that hard. But if you're like Amazon.com size, right, or as you get to be a big company, you're down for you have a 1 in 1,000 chance, say, of going down, and say you're down for a couple minutes. That could represent a lot of revenue. So those are the areas where then you need to have people who are on call, and you can't just have one person on call. You need to have 2 or 3 or 4 so they don't burn out and quit. So that's where kind of Heroku fits in here. And we came along and we were like, let's just simplify all of this stuff for developers so a developer can just focus on their app. And Heroku can give them the toggles or just fully manage all of this other stuff here: scalability, logs, compliance, security, OS. And really maybe what that summarizes as is take away a lot of the DevOps operational burden, infrastructure burden from you or your team or your company. And not only is that kind of taking away the burden in that it's extra things you have to do, but it also is taking away the burden in that if you need a new server to run your website on, you have to put a request in to the IT team or something like that, and it's going to take a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks before that server is up. With Heroku, you kind of just say, I want a server, I want to deploy an app, and it's up within minutes. And then Heroku also has these kind of team management and kind of team flow capabilities. So CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous delivery tools, pretty granular user management, roles and permissions, and then really easy integration with lots of third-party services. And we've been around for a while. Heroku's been around. Sorry if I didn't mention this earlier, but Heroku's been around since, we've been around for 10 years now, since 2007, and have been part of Salesforce since 2010, so 7 years as part of Salesforce. So we've been doing this for a while, handling over 13 billion requests a day. We've had over 6 million apps created, and those third-party services I mentioned, we have over 150 kind of integrations with third parties like database providers or email delivery providers or caching providers or application performance management. And kind of our approach to doing that and scalability has been so successful that one of the Heroku founders kind of documented the right way to build, a recommended way to build an app for the cloud. It's at 12factor.net. You can check it out. There's kind of just these 12 general design principles for building and deploying an app in the cloud. And they will help you build and deploy and scale an app, not just on Heroku, but really any cloud service. In general, if you want to grow or you want your company or your application to grow, these principles will make it, starting with these principles from the beginning, will make it really, really easy for your app and your team. But these practices also don't lock you in. As I mentioned, like they apply to other cloud services or scaling up in general, kind of in this new cloud environment, cloud world that we all live in and we're all working in. So that's the basics. And then I talked about languages. So once you've written an application in one of these languages or another language, you're ready to deploy that to Heroku. So let's get into some details of that. The basics are you push your code to Heroku, and it gets deployed. It runs in a dyno, which is kind of Heroku's name for a container before the term container was a thing. Heroku, for some of you that have been around for a while, Heroku's been around since before Docker was kind of a thing. So the word container wasn't there when we started putting applications and running them in dynos. And then you as a developer can manage that application from a command line interface or from a dashboard. You have access to these scalable data storage, email delivery, all sorts of other services via what we call add-ons, and then users make requests to your app. So all that big stack of things we saw is kind of simplified to this for you as a developer creating an application. And with that, I'm going to jump over to some demos. But before I do that, before I jump into the demos, I think there was one question. Did you have a question there? Happy to take a couple of quick questions.
Yeah, I have a stupid question. So
No question is stupid.
Okay. So this is, I know that Heroku is owned by Salesforce, from what I understand, but this is not specifically for Salesforce. So I can
Correct.
just make an app that has nothing to do with Salesforce.
Yeah, that's a good point. So the question was, I know Heroku is owned by Salesforce, but I can make an app that's not really connected to Salesforce. Yeah, Heroku has many customers that, probably many that don't even know that we're part of Salesforce, that are developers that use our services, have signed up with a credit card on the Heroku.com website. So when you use Heroku, you can sign up with a credit card, or it can be part of your kind of overall Salesforce contract. Yeah?
I can, so I'm curious, like, Salesforce has like a developer org that I can just, if I just want to learn and try it out, like, or Amazon Web Services are so cheap that I can just afford to just buy like some list or something. So, like, how do I get started with Heroku?
I'll show you that. So everything I'm going to do in the most of this that I do is all using the free tier or the free services offered by Heroku. So Heroku has a free plan for almost all the functionality, so you can try things out and test them out, see how they're going to work, and then you can move up there, or you can kind of incorporate that as part of your Salesforce contract. So I will jump in. If you go to signup.heroku.com, it kind of explains that, the sign up process and how you can get started from there. But I'm going to jump into, let's see if I can put this here, from scratch and deploy it. I'm going to show you scaling. We're going to add some data services. I'm going to mirror my display. That's not part of Heroku. All right, let's close that. Can everybody see that now? Yeah? If you can't see it, make some noise right now. All right. So what are we going to do first? We're going to create an app. So I'm going to create a directory to put this application in. And I'm going to do most of this from the command line here. All this stuff you can do from either a web dashboard, so point and click, or through the command line here. I enjoy command lines. It's kind of a little bit faster and jives with my brain for some reason. So here I've got a new directory. There's nothing in this directory at all. I'm going to create a new Heroku app. Just say Heroku create. I'm gonna initialize it as a Git repository, and then I'm gonna connect that Git repository to the Heroku app. So what was our name? Desolate Oasis. Okay, so we still got nothing in this directory, but I've created an empty container, that Heroku app, and I've initialized an empty Git repository. So right now I'm going to create kind of the simplest, you can see I've done it before, the simplest Heroku app possible is just putting a hello world into an index.php. For those supported languages that we saw earlier, the supported Heroku supported languages, officially supported languages, we auto detect when it's one of those languages, and we'll just handle kind of the build and deploy process for you. So now I've created this index.php file. Whoops, this index.php file which just says hello world in it, right? So I can let's see. I'm going to add that to the Git repository. I'm going to commit it. Now I'm going to say git push Heroku master. So for those of you that have used Git or know Git, there's the kind of the top of that might have been familiar. You might have recognized it. But then all of this is the Heroku recognizing this as a PHP app, a very, very simple PHP app, and kicking off the standard PHP build process. I haven't created a composer.json to specify dependencies and all these other things. So this is kind of like the absolute simplest you can do. So if I type Heroku open now, you can see, very small, there's my hello world, right? Thank you for the clapping. It really wasn't that difficult. You could do this yourself too. So now let's edit that, right? Let's, here I'll do, I'll open it up in Visual Studio Code. I've been liking this IDE recently. It's super small. Let me see if I can change the. I'm not going to play with that. So there's Hello World. Let's say we want to, I'm going to make it, for those of you that know HTML or have done some HTML, I'm going to put it inside an H2 tag. So I'm going to make it bigger, right? Actually, let's do H1. Ooh, better? There we go. Ah, okay. Thank you. Speak up if you can't hear or can't see or do not understand something, please. So I've just, right, surrounded that in H1. Does the marquee tag still work? Can we do that? Is that still a thing? I'm going to try that. This might not work. So I got H1 and marquee. Do you guys remember what the marquee tag does? It's like the scrolling across the top or something. Let's see what happens. I was thinking of trying the blink tag, but I'm not sure that is supported anymore. All right, so I'm going to go back here. I'm going to git add, git commit, make funner, and git push Heroku master again, right? So this is like the absolute simplest way you would interact with Heroku. Just starting out from the kind of the very basics. This is how I started out kind of learning Heroku. This would take a while and is kind of like a lot of typing if you're a team and you might want to set up CI or CD kind of automation to do these deploys in the future. But for now, we're just going to do this, right? So there's the URL. I can just type Heroku, open it again, and it'll open it up in a browser. There we go. We got some Hello World marking and some janky caret greater than. So super easy, right? I have a website now. Any of you right now could go to desolate.oasis81408.herokuapp.com and see the same thing here. There's nothing like magic. I'm not running it on my local machine. I haven't set any of this up beforehand. It's all just kind of real-time live. And again, this is PHP, but it's the same with Java, Ruby, Node, anything like that. So let's do something else that's kind of fun. So say you got mentioned in the New York Times or something, and your app is blown up, and you have a ton of visitors on it. So you need to scale up. So if we run Heroku PS here, this tells us that, hey, we're running a web dyno. It's on the free tier. So to answer your question, like this right now is all using the free tier. But if I'm going to scale up, now I need to switch to a paid tier. And that one on the end says I'm just running one of those. And you can see that it's up. So I got all that information there. I'm going to say Heroku PS scale. Let's see, web equals 1. If I can remember what this looks like. There we go. So I've aliased H as Heroku because I type it so many times. So I'm going to change this to web equals 1, and I'm going to go with standard 1x. So these are kind of our standard kind of like production grade dynos. So now if I type Heroku PS, you can see I'm now running on a standard 1x dyno. It's still the web process, and I'm still running just one of those, right? But there's a ton of load now coming into my app, right? People are refreshing it. All of you guys are visiting this app. It's refreshing. So I want to scale up. I want to go to web equals 100. And before I do that, I just split screen here. And it's super tiny again. Oh no. Let's do a new tab. What's that? The build command?
Yeah, for 100 scale, when does it hit my credit card?
Will it hit your credit card?
Yeah.
Hopefully not yours. But and I get free Heroku as I'm demoing it here as an employee of Heroku. But yeah, so the standard 1x dyno I think is like $25 a month. but they're all prorated to the second, right? So I'm going to use 100 dynos, 100 standard 1x dynos for 5 minutes, right? So take $25 a month, prorate it down to whatever that 5 minutes is, and then multiply that by 100. We could even do some math later if you want.
Does the charge occur though?
The charge occurs once a month. So you get your bill. Everyone gets the bill at the end of the month. And if you're in part of like an enterprise contract or Salesforce contract, that contract has a number of credits that are just put in at the beginning of that contract, and you kind of bill down or use up those credits over time. So really what I wanted to show here were the logs, but this thing is super small. All right, hold on, bear with me 1 second. I'm going to go back to normal zoom here. New window. It's not zooming this one. All right, what I wanted to show here was all of those 100 dynos starting up really quickly. What is this one? What was our Salesforce dev meetup? Daniel, let me know if I'm getting too long and you need to kick me off. Sorry, so I'm going to run Heroku logs minus T. Minus tail, that's the same thing as minus T. So what this is going to do is open up a log session for all the logs from my application. You can see here there's some logs coming through from just a while ago when we were hitting refresh a bunch of times. I just added some blank lines to see some space here. So I'm going to do PS scale web equals 100 and hit enter. And over on the right now, please. Did I pull into the wrong one? There we go. So there's the output of the logs. Starting up 100 dynos, 100 containers with your application in it, that Hello World application, horizontally scaling it. Then the Heroku router is going to receive all those requests that you're getting from like TechCrunch and New York Times or wherever your app got mentioned. And it's going to distribute the load among all those 100 dynos that you've just created. So you can see each one of these is named web.something. There's web.94, web.61. So there we go. I'm running 100 dynos at $25 a month. And then say, okay, the load's gone down a bit. I don't need 100, but maybe I need 10. So I'm going to go down to 10, and over here you should see, there we go, state changed it down, and it's giving each process a sig term and disposing of that dyno, disposing of that container, no longer being charged for that. So if we were to run Heroku PS, you can see that we just have web.1 through 10 running right now. And they were last scaled up. One of them was 3 minutes ago, and all the others were just about a minute ago. So we had those 100 running for about a minute. Cool, let's close out of there.
Chris,
Yeah.
do you have a question? What if you didn't know Miley Cyrus was going to tweet your website?
Yeah, good question.
Can you set it to automatically?
Yeah, so the question was, what if you don't know Miley Cyrus is going to tweet your new app or your new website? This is really fast, so you could just come in here and be like, oh, I got an alert that my app is crashing. I'm going to turn it up right away. But you could also, thank you for that segue. What I was going to show next is, so I've showed this command line interface, right? But we also have this dashboard that makes it super easy to interact with your Heroku apps. So I've got a lot of apps here, but let's find that Salesforce dev app. Actually, it wasn't called Salesforce dev. What was it called? Desert Oasis? Desolate Oasis. Thanks, yeah. So Heroku if you don't give your app a name, Heroku makes up these like haiku-ish kind of poetry names. So you could name it something if you want. Like I've named one here, Dreamhouse Disco Heroku DJ and Heroku DJ Production and Travolta. You can see that I make a lot of serious applications. Desolate Oasis. So here's sounds like some pizza just crashed. Here's the dashboard for that Heroku app. You can see on the right side, I've got this activity feed of what's going on. I can see, I've made a change to the app. If I have other team members working on it, you can see what they've done to it. You can see the deploys that have happened. I can go back and check out the build log if there was some error or some difference I wanted to investigate there. I've got some metrics here on the top, response time, throughput, and memory. There's not much there because we just created this application. But if I go to that metrics tab here, I'm going to change actually go back to resources. I'm going to change this to a performance dyno. So we have kind of 4 different dyno types. Make it simple. We don't try to give you, 10 or 20 or 30 different ones to choose from. I'm going to go with performance, and let's just scale this down to 2 for now. Confirm. And now there's a button here that says enable auto scaling. So I can turn on auto scaling, and then I can give it a range, maybe from 1 to 10. And I can trigger those scaling events on this response time. So whatever response time my users are getting, if I suddenly get a lot of traffic, the response time for users is going to go down and down and down and down. So we set it by default at 1,000 milliseconds or 1 second. You can change it for what you want. And you can set up notifications for like if you get up all the way to 10 dynos and you've gone to the end of this bar here, you can contact Heroku and we'll give you some more dynos. So if I turn this on now, if my app started getting a ton of load, those 2 dynos that you see here would start going up to 3 and 4 and 5. So there's auto scaling, and we hope to roll this out to the other dyno types now, but it's just for the performance dynos now, and hopefully, it'll be coming soon to those standard ones. So that's auto scaling. Some other things I wanted to show quickly in here were this metrics tab, so you can get a lot more detailed metrics on all the events that happened, right? So here's the deploy and the dyno restart and the scale events kind of all happened at the same time. This is, what is this time range? Past 24 hours, so they're all kind of crunched together there. Let's make it past 2 hours. So here are all those kind of different events that happened as I interacted with deploying and scaling the app. You can see response time going between, 2 milliseconds and 7 milliseconds here. Memory usage staying very low. This scale is way off because I scaled up to the performance dynos now, which give you much more RAM. Throughput, how many requests per second am I handling, and dyno load, which is like CPU load on that container, CPU use. So you have all these kind of metrics to introspect. You have the logs, which I showed earlier, which your application can output to. But then when you need more details, you might want something like an add-on, right? So there's one that I use often called Paper Trail. So this is the 150 other add-on services that I mentioned earlier that kind of give you access to some third-party service. And it's all like the billing is all managed within your Heroku account, so you don't have to get 2 different bills or even worry about 2 different logins. All your logins are managed through here, and these services start from a free tier for most of them and go up to really big kind of enterprise level support. So I'm just going to turn on the free one and hit provision there. So now I've got Paper Trail. Similarly, kind of the most common add-ons are something like Postgres, right? I need a database. And again, you can start with this free tier, play it out. I think it's limited to 10,000 rows, or you can go up to $12,250 a month for Shield 8. And Shield 8 is a good opportunity to mention Heroku Shield, which is for those companies that have compliance requirements that I mentioned a little bit earlier, like financial compliance, PCI, HIPAA, these Shield databases. I think it kind of lines up with Salesforce's marketing of, product marketing of compliance requirement products. So you can kind of get the HIPAA or PCI certification at the platform level from Heroku, and then all you have to worry about is your code that you're deploying onto Heroku. So we'll just add a hobby dev free database. So if I go to Paper Trail right now, no searchable events. Let's refresh this a few times, or if some of you visit it. See if we get, Papertrail sometimes takes a little while. So all the logs from my application are now being piped over to Papertrail. Papertrail stores them, makes them, indexes them, makes them searchable down here so I can search for certain error codes or go to a specific time that I knew there was an error that I need to investigate more. So that's super useful for debugging. Heroku Postgres. So some of these add-on services are provided by Heroku, but most of them are third parties. We provide a Postgres data service, a Kafka data service, and a Redis data service. So very simple. This is the free tier, so you kind of get a very simple dashboard of, hey, you're using 0 of 20 connections, you're 0 of 10,000 rows of your free tier. 7.6 megs is kind of the base size for the kind of scaffolding needed in your database, and you have 0 tables. And then there's a lot more here as you go up in the tiers to manage high availability or backups or migrating databases or having warm standby databases. Do you have another question? Yeah? Go ahead.
Not immediate, but
Yeah.
I really do have like some type of question afterwards.
About what? Oh, yeah. We can answer questions afterwards, and if we run out of time before Austin's talking, I'll be around here. We can chat.
Well, basically, my question was again probably silly, but because I've never actually. Anyway, so I'm assuming this like 25 minutes or whatever is just the time that it's running. So like if I just hit that whole one, it's going to be like a millisecond.
Yeah.
You round it out by
Yeah. That's a good question. He was asking about how for like how you're billed, like per second. Is that the time that the app is running? Is it the time that the app is being getting a request from the public internet? And so the way that, at least on the free tier, the way it works is that it's any time that your process is running, right? And your process is running even if no one is hitting your application. So even if you're getting no traffic, your process is still running because it has to be up and listening so it can respond quickly to a request for traffic. But with the free tier, if there's no traffic for 30 minutes, we sleep your dyno. And then the next request that comes in for it, it may take like 3, 5, 8 seconds for that first request to get a response as we kind of rehydrate and wake up your application.
Okay, so anytime the dyno starts, basically charged for 30 minutes.
You're charged for 1 second when it starts, and then every second going forward from there.
But basically, like a second as in it's been running for a second, or like however many milliseconds it's been running within that second of the CPU.
It's for like clock time, for however long on the clock your dyno has been running, not like CPU use or request usage time.
So like if I start the dyno like 5 minutes later, it's not gonna have it for 5 minutes. It's going to go through like a few, like some number of milliseconds that it's been running for the CPU, right?
Can you ask that again? Sorry.
I mean, I'll
Okay, yeah, we'll talk more. So really, when you deploy your application and your dyno starts, if it's available on the public internet, like if I can type in Desolate Oasis and get something back, you're being charged for that time that it was awake before I hit it, when I hit it, and after I hit it. You have to actively go in and say, Heroku scale to 0 if you want to not be billed. We can talk more after. Yes?
Quick question regarding the compliance part that you mentioned.
Yeah.
The physical locations of all the hardware within the US, or do you have distributed hardware available across the globe?
Yeah, good question. We have, so for the enterprise tier where that compliance product is available, you can deploy to, I think, 6 different locations. So US, East or West Coast, 2 in Europe, 1 in Tokyo, and 1 in Sydney. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, those are the ones we have now. And I imagine we'll be adding more, but that's what's available now. Yeah. All right, so we've looked at databases. Let's look at, let's see. Are you guys more interested in seeing team collaboration tools or Heroku Connect, which is a managed data synchronization service to move data between your Salesforce org and your Heroku app? Connect. All right. So Heroku Connect is just another add-on. I'm going to add it right here. there's a demo edition, so you can check this out for free, and then if you can add it on as part of your Salesforce contract when you're ready to go big with it. So the purpose of Heroku Connect was, some of you asked a question earlier actually about like, does this Heroku thing like live by itself? Are there customers on it who just use it without using Salesforce? And the answer to that was yes. We have customers that have a Salesforce org and have Heroku apps, and they share data between them. We have customers that are just using Heroku. But many of you maybe have had to write code that hits the Salesforce API to get data out of it or to put data into it, and generally to move that data between Salesforce and other systems at your company, right? So let's see if I can remember the passwords here. I'm going to go to my other account actually. So I have one set up already for my doppelganger Alan Turing over here. Nope. I'm not going to be able to remember the password, so I will show you an existing one. Let's go fix. All right, so I have this little app set up called Fix Kits. You can look at it here. It's a demo app of a coffee supplies kind of e-commerce store. You can buy these different things. I can add this AeroPress coffee maker to my cart. This is actually using Spree, which is a e-commerce framework that is kind of sits on top of Ruby and Rails. I'm going to check out as a guest. See if it'll fill in my stuff. Please don't send me lots of stuff, but yes, that's my home address. I didn't want to type all that in. I wanted to use the autocomplete. So I'm just creating an order here. So I've created this order for AeroPress coffee, and I've got this order number up here on the top, right? Let's go. If I go back to my Heroku app here and I click on Fix Kits, you will see that I have Heroku Connect as an add-on here. I clicked on Heroku Connect. I'm going to go over to the dashboard here. And now I have a lot of things that I'm looking at here. So the first thing that I had to do when I came in here was go to Settings and say Manage Connection. So here is where I've specified a Postgres database, right? So I'm going to be moving data between a Postgres database and Salesforce. So I've specified this Postgres database. If it's running on Heroku, which it always is, generally this is filled in for you. And then the next thing I had to do was manage Salesforce. So here I clicked Authorize Now, and I'm logging in with my Salesforce credentials that have API access. So I've already done that. And then I'm back in this overview page. And the next thing I did was click Create Mapping. And that just went out to the Salesforce API and got a list of, can you guys, sorry if this is super small. That went out to the Salesforce API and pulled in a list of all the objects that are out in my Salesforce account, right? So a lot of these are just the standard, most of them actually are the standard objects that come with Salesforce. And I didn't mean to click that one, but I did. So let's go back. You can click almost any of these. Right, like contact is the common one. Let's do, I think I already have contact in there. Let's do community. We'll sync that one. Community is not supported by the Salesforce Streaming API. Okay, that's all right. So it's a little hard to see because it's zoomed in. So what I'm doing now is I'm creating a relationship between that Postgres, the data in Postgres and the data in Salesforce. So on the top here, I have Salesforce to database, set up the synchronization there. So the streaming API is not supported for this object type, the Salesforce object type, so I've got to use polling. I can change this down to 2 minutes, or if I really don't need it updated that often, I can maybe put it at 30 minutes. Ooh, accelerate polling. I haven't seen that. Use the Salesforce. Oh, that uses the streaming API if it's available. And then the next piece is database to Salesforce. And this object read only, so I can't do anything with that. But if it was an object that I could write into, I would be able to specify, that anytime something changes in Postgres, to immediately write it into Salesforce. And then if you keep scrolling down here, the fields within that object are automatically pulled in, and I can select all of them or a subset of the fields that I want to synchronize between my Postgres database and my Salesforce org. So by default, it looks like it selected created date and name. Let's do description and is active. What's that?
Oh, we were just asking ourselves which object would work, and if going back to your list of just the easy one would be account, contact.
Yeah, I think so. I was trying to find one that it didn't have already, because so you can see I have these mappings in here that I've created already. So like for account, I've already set that up, and you can see that it's set up to pull every 2 minutes for Salesforce to database. It pulls the database every 10 seconds for the database to Salesforce, and I can edit any of these also if I need to. So here's that same screen that we were on, but this is for account.
Should wrap up here pretty soon.
Okay, sorry. So that's it. I mean, that is all you have to do to set up this synchronization between Postgres and Salesforce, and then suddenly you have raw kind of standard ANSI SQL access to your Salesforce data. You can build applications on Heroku around that data that use that data. For instance, like in that Red Robin app that I was showing you guys earlier, they're using this to synchronize data to Postgres, customer data to Postgres, and then expose that within the Red Robin mobile app. When I log in as myself, it says like, oh, hey, Chris, you've had 10 burgers this week. Thank you for being such a good customer. Please do not die from cholesterol. So that's the basics.
So you could set this up for, I was talking with somebody that was working with a client that had like 10 million leads,
Yeah.
10 million contacts.
Yep.
Which, it's not, you quickly run into your governor limits on Salesforce doing any kind of search of that.
Yep.
So you could mirror it here, do your searches externally, separate from governor limits, and then bring back the result.
Yeah, that's a good point. So when you use Heroku Connect, Heroku Connect is whitelisted from all any of the API limits. So they won't come out of your API limit bucket. So you don't not only have to not write code, but you can also not worry about hitting those API limits with Heroku Connect. So last thing before I finish up is next steps for you guys. If you want to learn more, kind of do some stuff on your own, there are 4 combination of kind of quick starts and trails on Trailhead. So you can check those out, learn a little bit more, deploy your first Heroku app. You can go through the Heroku Connect quick start to get a little bit more detail about what I showed you there at the end. Heroku Flow was the team collaboration tools that I didn't talk about, but you can check out how that works, because most of the time you're building software as part of a team, not by yourself. And that's about it. Thanks for your time.